I don't know where I am because I got distracted. Greeting friends and welcome back to part 2 of making Felix's time skip costume from Fire Emblem Three Houses. If you have not seen part 1 of this video, the link is below in the description. In this final part, I'll be wrapping up the rest of his costume. First up is making his pants. For this one, I went with the commercial pattern Vogue 8719 and make alterations to it along the way. I started out with tracing the pattern and added all the modification of the measurement from there. After that, I had everything cut out just like my previous pieces to the jacket with all the underlining, waistbands, and etc. pieces. Sewing the pants together, I worked on the front fly and zipper. Aligning them correctly is very important because I don't want the measurements to be off, especially on the waist area. For this pants, I used the flat fell seam method, which is a seam made by placing one edge inside the folded edge of fabric, then stitching the fold down, which is then secured by top stitching. After finishing sewing up the pants, I ironed out the seam so that everything is laid nice and smooth and hemmed the bottom to finish it all up. And now we have a completed pair of pants for Felix. Next up are the gloves. Using a previous gusset glove I've made, I've used that as a base to trace a new pair to modify into one for Felix. I have a love and hate for making gloves. It's mostly sewing on the small gusset part because you have to do a lot of curving and there's a lot of small seam allowance to it. Then I traced and started cutting out the fabrics for the glove. For this one, I'm using a stretched suede for his gloves, which I really like the texture of. It also matches the blue suede on the rest of his outfit. The gusset are the part in which goes between the fingers. It provides space and dimension in the fingers for movement so that they can match the shape of your hand. The top part of the wrist area had interfacing so that it has more structure and support to stay up. Also, when adding on the fur trim, it wouldn't weigh it down and keeping the shape back up. Then the fur trim was cut out and sewn on as the finishing part. It's the same fur that I used for the coat and the cape. Despite not liking the sew glove, I do find the satisfactory of having a nicely made pair of gloves. I'm really happy how these pair came out. They fit so well and I just love the shape of it entirely. This whole costume is actually really heavy, not really summer friendly. I actually had the client come over to do a test fitting with, safety and precaution and everything because, we're still in a pandemic, but a lot of people don't realize that. But yeah, took safety measure to have him come by, do a quick fitting, and I basically took down some notes what I need to take in, thankfully. So the last time I've seen him, I made the pants and the glove. The pants was actually one of those pants that's actually very slim fitted on him, but because it isn't stretch, it's very a particular measurement. So I had him came over. I already finished it by the time he came over, and I made it basically like a slack. And once he wore it, I pinned it, and then I basically slimmed it down and took it in. So now it fits him perfectly. Mostly because Felix has a boot cover, and it's also a very tight boot cover, so I don't want any bulkiness to it with the pants. So now that the pants been resolved, I can start on the boot cover. And he dropped by some shoes for me so I can use as reference, so I can start making the pattern for the boot cover because it actually goes up to all the way his thigh. I fit in these shoes. I have really big feet, so I'm actually gonna use my leg as the base and probably just wrap it and make the boot cover from that. So that's what I'll be doing next, and after that I just have his belt accessories, and I think I can finally be finished with Felix. Just kidding, I ended up using my boyfriend's leg instead because it was easier to see what I was drawing out. So after I was done wrapping his leg, I basically skinned it off and traced it out, add seam allowance, and made a pattern out of it. So I'm going to test it out by making a mock-up first to make sure everything fits in handy dandy.
I did a mock-up with some stretch fabric because the boot cover will be stretched itself and ended up looking good, so I went ahead and cut out the actual fabric. The fabric I'm using for the boot cover is also a 4-way knit fabric. There's few designs and embellishment details to the boot, such as the studs and buckles. I did some satin stitching for the brown detailing part. That's right, satin stitching on knit fabric. It does work if you stabilize and back the fabric correctly. I also doubled the fabric on the boot cover to make it thicker. After sewing the covers together, I attached it onto the boots to see how it looks. The boot cover are of course removable as well. The buckles and strap you see on the boots are all non-functional and mostly decorated to make things more simple for this progress. Then adding on a finishing touch with the studs. I ended up having to spray paint these because I actually didn't have enough silver in my inventory at the time. The boots were all then finished. I think I missed filming some of the progress of the boots midway, but they were mostly just applique and satin stitching of the upper detail, so wasn't really much to it after that.
"2,000 years later."
And next up, probably my most non-favorite part, the shoulder pauldron. I started off by breaking down the pieces to the best I can with the reference I had. I made a rough draft of the pattern pieces and tested out to see how they would look.
So it looks all over the place right now with all the pins and everything. Don't worry, this is just a mock-up of a test trowel that I was cutting out while I was patterning, so this isn't the final pleather that I'll be using, but mostly just testing out the placement. I had to do a lot of trimming and modifying to make sure it fits, and then after that putting all the outfits together just so to make sure it actually sits correctly. I think so far it actually does fit well. So I just still need to work on the strap and basically the strap that goes under it to keep the placement, to keep basically this whole thing sitting on here. So I had to figure that out. Maybe it's gonna ring around. I have to test it out. But other than that, I think I can just cut out the actual fabric and start working on the details. Oh, and of course I can't forget to add the diamonds and tassels here, which are blue. So after putting this together, I'll put together the diamonds and tassels. So it's just like a whole arm of details that I don't even know what's the purpose and functionality of it except to look cool.
This is definitely one of the harder part for me to figure out since I don't make armor pieces as often in cosplay. I tend to stay away from them. After figuring out the weird looking pieces over here, I started cutting out the actual piece on the brown pleather that I'm using for his pauldron. I made the final pattern version on paper first before that. Grid paper does wonders for drafting and measuring out armor pieces. Then I punch holes onto the pieces of armor individually so that I can sew on the leather detailing, which is what's holding the pauldron all together on the top shoulder portion. I'm using strips of the stretch suede from the gloves earlier as this for the detailing since it doesn't fray and it goes really well with it.
So for the diamonds part of the sleeve here, the dangling of the tassels, I just went with the warbler, cut out the diamond pieces and just basically spray paint it. Next I'm just gonna punch little holes on it so I can add the ring loops so I can attach them all together, and also the tassel, and then sew it on and attach it to the pauldron arm thing, and that should be it for that.
And here we have another aesthetic add to his outfit. After connecting all the diamonds together, the tassels were tied and the loops onto the end. It is then connected to another blue strips of suede, which is then sewn onto the lower part of the pleather by the elbow, which has a velcro for the closure. This really has a lot of parts to it.
For this part right here, I made it out of pleather, which I spray painted silver, which works pretty well actually. It's just mostly just to fasten the belt strap so it stays in place. I made this with Velcro, so it's adjustable. But yeah, this part's completely done. I deviated completely from the original plan. I had this whole thing sketched out, but it didn't work out, so I just deviated, but it still works. I used a lot of like those fastener things for paper. It works really well to hold like puncture stuff together. It works for phone too. But yeah. Next up is the belt on the waist for where the holster is for the sword. So I'm not really sure on what the dimension of the sheath and basically for the sword is, so I'm gonna have to figure a way to make this part adjustable so that when they do have the sword, I don't think they have it yet, but when they do get it, you know, this will accommodate and adjust the width of this. So maybe, yeah, I'll make the strap adjustable somehow. So yeah, here we go. Alright, so I just winged the pattern on papers right now, so I'm gonna cut that out and see how it looks like, and if the measurement works and it sits well, I'll cut that out on the actual pleather after. So let's go do that. So my mannequin here is only half and it's legless, so the belt looks kind of weird, but it's exactly where I want it to be. I think this is good for how the belt should hang, because it hangs on the lower hip past the booty area, so I think that's good. And I just need to make another belt for the top, and I think I'm gonna, well, I can't think, I'm for sure gonna have to add like just a single belt loop on the side hip over here in order for the support, so I can actually have something to hang off of.
So after figuring out more patterns on paper, it is on to cutting everything out. I'm really close to finishing this part, so I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into that because it's just basically more sewing from here on out. I actually spent more days on the belt as well, so many suffering were excluded from the footage.
Eventually,
It's been a long progress, but I can finally say Felix is all done. I just finished wrapping up all the belts and straps accessory that's just basically hanging around him. He's a strapping young lad. So for the belt part, I added on the little belt loop right here, so in order for the belt to have some support somehow to hang. So you have two straps on here. You have the first one which hangs around the waistline, and then the second one is a little bigger because it actually goes all the way around and drops at the hip line. They're all attached and detachable with the Velcro, so all they need to do is just put it through the loop on and off. I also made the 3D accessory part right here removable as well with Velcro because they can't really put the whole thing through the loop. So luckily I made it detachable, so all they need to do is just basically have this off before putting on the belt and then just slapping it right on after. This is the back side. I actually really love how the back looks. Initially I didn't know how it would look because it was just funky in general because I was trying to brainstorm on how it would lay, but after drawing out the initial paper pattern and taking a look at it, it actually makes more sense. But here's another part, so I actually just really like the design for the bag. I don't think anyone would see it with the cape covering it because most of these details end up being covered anyways, like this back part right here. But if they do like some, you know, epic cape movement, you can probably see it. I think the most difficult one that I struggled on is for sure the shoulder part because doing the breakdown of that is not really fun, and I'm really unfamiliar with structure for pauldrons, but it's not even the pauldrons, like they're made out of like pleather, but either way it was just like a lot of million pieces like putting it together, but I still figured it out. And it's also Velcro. It's actually the more annoying part to put on because for this one they have to put it, it's also Velcro, but they have to put it through this strap right here first in order to wear it, so they're gonna need a little assistant, but it should be good. And yeah, he is all finished now, so I'm happy.
If you had stayed through the entire journey of this sewing vlog, I want to say thank you so much for watching this entire project. I started this early in March 2020 and didn't complete it entirely until December of last year. This was definitely one of my longer commission projects of 2020 and I had a lot of fun with it. It gave me the chance to work with new methods and figure out new techniques. It's honestly one of the reasons why I do love taking on commission because it challenges me to always learn more, especially with projects I wouldn't usually make for myself, and I love the work of researching and everything else to it, even if it gives me a hard time of agonizing over the littlest details. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe, and if you want to see more of my stitch crafting and sewing journey. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all in the next video. Treat your needles and thread like they're your wine and bread, and happy crafting. Bye.